Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, so what if a society actually achieved perfection? Yeah, no poverty, no conflict, no division at all, only to watch the whole thing just crumble into dust. Well, today, we're diving into an account of a 300-year cycle that does exactly that. We're going to trace the path from a perfect utopia all the way to total ruin.
So let's just jump right in. The text we're looking at, which comes from an account in the Book of Mormon, starts at the absolute peak. I mean, this quote says it all, right? They had created what they felt was the happiest society on Earth. It was a true golden age where conflict just wasn't a thing anymore.
So what did this ideal society actually look like? What were the key ingredients that made it work so well?
Well, the record says that just 36 years after this huge societal event, they achieved something pretty extraordinary. And this wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was a total social and economic restructuring. Everyone shared the same belief system, which got rid of all the arguments. And they had this really radical economic idea of holding all things common, so the whole class structure, rich versus poor, just vanished.
And what's really fascinating here is the focus on this new, unified identity. All those old tribal divisions that had defined them for centuries, gone. They just disappeared. Like the quote says, they were now in one, all united by this shared purpose and belief.
So you might be thinking, okay, a society like this can't last, right? It's just a brief moment in time. But what's so wild about this account is just how long this amazing state of being actually went on. And yeah, this was no short-lived experiment. This timeline shows us their golden age lasted for almost 2 full centuries. Think about that. The entire generation that built the society passed away by year 100, but the peace held. Even when leadership changed hands nearly 100 years later, the core principles of unity and equality were still going strong.
For almost 200 years, this society just thrived. No strife, no envy, no division. According to the source material, it was a truly unheard of period of stability and genuine happiness.
But, of course, here's where things take a turn. As we get into this next section, we start to see how this perfect world begins to unravel. And like any system, it was vulnerable, and the change started, well, really subtly.
In fact, the text points to a very specific moment when things started to go sideways. After 200 years of peace, in the 201st year, the very first signs of decay started showing up.
And it's a dramatic shift. You've got the unity of their past, humility, sharing everything, one big community. But then pride, private ownership, and the rise of churches built for profit, which, of course, immediately brought back social classes.
So here's the crucial point. The very first symptom of this decay wasn't violence or some big political fight. It was materialism. It was the desire for fancy clothes, for status symbols that started to eat away at the community spirit that had held them all together for so long.
And this growing pride in materialism didn't just create classes. Oh no, it eventually fractured the very identity of the society, splitting it right down the middle. Just 30 years after those first signs of pride popped up, the source describes a great division. That single, unified identity they had treasured for generations, it was completely shattered.
The population broke apart along ideological lines, and they even went back to using old tribal names to mark their new identities, the Nephites and the Lamanites. And this wasn't about where you lived or who your parents were. It was all about what you believed and whether you were willing to stick to the old principles.
This wasn't some passive disagreement either. The source makes it crystal clear that one group was actively teaching their kids to hate the other. So what started as a little pride in materialism had now morphed into this deep-seated generational hatred.
The story shows this really rapid moral decay, and what's so fascinating is that it hit both sides. It wasn't just one group going bad. First, the dissenting faction. They grew stronger. But then, the believers, the Nephites, they also got corrupted by their own wealth and pride. The rot was everywhere.
And in the end, pretty much the entire population, with just a tiny handful of exceptions, descended into wickedness. Those original ideals of their perfect society were completely lost to everyone.
The final act described in this account is just so symbolic. In the 320th year, the guy in charge of their history, a man named Ammaron, feels he has to hide the sacred records, basically protecting them from a people who didn't care about them anymore. It marks the final, absolute end of this entire chapter of their civilization.
And this whole story leaves us with a really provocative question, doesn't it? Is this cycle of unity, prosperity, pride, division, and collapse, is that just an inevitable pattern for any society that achieves greatness, or is it a warning? It's definitely something to think about.